everyone, and welcome to the Web Talk Show. My name is Armando Perez-Carreno, and today we're joined by Mark Anderson from Anderson Investigative Associates. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you.
No, it's a pleasure to have you here. It's an honor. I've seen what you're doing in your industry, and we'll get to it in a second, and it's really amazing. And I think we're going to give our listeners a sneak peek into something that they have not seen before. So before we continue, Mark, could you give us a very brief intro as to who you are and what you do?
Sure. Uh, I'm old, number one, so I've been around a while. I always tell people when I do classes, the one thing you get from my resume is number one, I'm old, and number two, I can't hold a job. So I've been in this business, the investigation business, for over 40 years now. I actually have 2 degrees in chemistry. I'm a forensic chemist by training. So I started out working in the crime lab and decided that those people were kind of weird and I didn't want to do that for the rest of my career. So I used my science background to move over into the investigation field. And I've been doing interviews and investigations for the last 40 some years, about the last 15 in the arena of training. So out there training people on how to do interviews and interrogations and things like that.
Wow, that is a very interesting background. So you were in the forensic space, and was that the again? We stumble upon these things sometimes out of just randomness, luck.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know. But was it so? Did you enjoy the job at first, and then it just changed, or did you from the very beginning? You start to see that there was some part of it that you really liked, but the others that just were completely off.
Yeah, it's a Armando, that's an interesting question. I think we can summarize. I like to make things really simple because I'm a simple guy. I was young and dumb, I guess is how it would go. I went to school and I had no idea what I wanted to do. Wasn't mature enough to know what I wanted to do. My dad was a chemistry teacher for years, and I thought, well, I'll make him proud if I get a chemistry degree. So I got my chemistry degree, and then I thought, well, now what do I do? And there were like 4 options for graduate school that I thought about, and I decided the forensic sounded fun because I've always been interested in the criminal justice side of things but never really thought about doing it on the street, being on the street doing it.
Mhm.
So I got that degree and it was interesting. I thought it would be interesting working in the laboratory. And then I saw how laboratories are set up and that I would be doing the same thing over and over and over again. And I thought, you know what? I would rather be out there doing this in the field. And at that point, they could use people who had my background in the field for crime scenes and stuff like that because there weren't many people out in the field that had that kind of a background. So it made it pretty easy for me to slide out of the forensic side and move into the law enforcement side.
Oh, that makes sense. And at what point did you start the training side of it? So you went into the field, but at what point did it
Wow.
sort of start to flow into, well, yeah, training at the end of the day?
I think it goes back to the same thing. My dad was in education for years,
Mm.
and I always found the education arena fascinating. I think when I got into the law enforcement side, I became a certified police instructor within a couple years of that. So I guess I've been a certified police instructor since 1985, which is a long, long time. I
I,
realize time is going awful fast for me. So I've always kind of done a little bit along the way. I didn't move, and then while I was working out in the field, I also took a couple positions as an adjunct instructor to a couple colleges here in Pennsylvania. Kind of to keep my foot in that classroom side. And then it wasn't until 2009 that I moved full time into the training arena and trained for the federal government for 5 years and then started this business thereafter.
oh, wow. So what is in an investigative technique? Because you talk about it, it sounds like something we understand, but at the end of the day, I just from incorrect assumptions, I guess, or maybe perhaps out of not having context, we assume immediately, or at least I, wrongly, uh, investigative techniques, I start thinking law enforcement, right? Does this
Right.
only apply to law enforcement and related fields, or is this something that is also used in business, for example?
Well, I think it has huge applicability in business, and I think this is one of the things you make a really good point, Armando. Is I think a lot of time terminology becomes a drag on the system. You know, we have these concepts from what we see on TV, and it's not necessarily realistic. The easiest one is the term interrogation has a
Mm-hmm.
terrible connotation associated with it, but it's not in fact accurate as to what interrogation is. So the investigative technique side, you're right. You think of law enforcement, but the reality is this is stuff is applicable across the board wherever you have people that might be taking advantage of a situation. We talked about, some of your listeners that they're owners, small business owners. I was just listening to a podcast yesterday, and they were talking about dental offices.
Mm-hmm.
And the American Dental Association apparently indicates that over one third of dentists are embezzled by employees of their office. So they have a receptionist or a billing person that's taking money out of the pot for their own their own benefit. So what would we use to find that? Well, number one, you want to have controls to try to keep that from happening. But if you called me in to look at that, I would be using investigative techniques to try to identify where that shortcoming came from, how they lost that money, and how to restore that and fix the system so it doesn't happen again. Does that make sense?
It does. That is actually, and that is a very good use case because yes, like you very clearly just stated, it can apply to any conversation or any situation where someone needs to acquire additional context information from someone else. But that example is great because it is an investigative technique to find out what happened. In this case, it might be something wrong that someone did, and you're trying to figure
Mm-hmm.
out who did it, why they did it, try to stop it from happening again to avoid the business having future issues like that. And it's funny, the example that you gave, we have a client that works in that space, and I clearly remember at some point there was something like that going on, and so I guess the statistic is real. So okay, that makes perfect sense. And so it'll help in business, it'll help in law enforcement. Is it something you think that businesses actually look into? Do you see some businesses going into training for things like this, or is it mostly that it's still a very well kept secret of the law enforcement space?
I I think that's another fantastic question. I think in this arena of which would fall into the arena of fraud, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times it's not talked about until you get caught with your pants down and you lose money.
Right.
So when you think about expenses for a business, you're probably not proactively going to invest in this until it becomes an issue for you, and that becomes a problem. One of the things we want to do is have some controls within that business so that we know whether this is happening or not, because that's what these especially frauds are propagated on, is the fact that nobody knows. It's done in a closet, it's done secretly, and that's how they can sometimes continue to fester for years at a
Mm-hmm.
time. So I don't think a lot of people invest in this until it becomes a necessity where they're now hurting and they now need to figure out what happened.
Do you think that businesses or organizations, doesn't have to be a business, should take a proactive approach, like you're saying, and learn about this? Then I'll give an example before, sorry, letting you answer. I remember, very clearly remember, I was having lunch with the CEO of an important bank in Mexico, and it was just a casual chat. And I remember the topic of comedy came up, and he was saying that he was learning comedy, like stand-up comedy. Not to do stand-up, mind you, but because of the mental agility that it gave him for the day-to-day in the business. And so it was a very out of context comment that just stayed with me. And so going back to what we're talking about now, do you think this is something that people should strive to perhaps learn and get those muscles going for other things?
I think it is, and I love your example because I actually know a fraud examiner, fraud investigator up in Seattle, Washington, who actually just did the same thing. She joined this comedy troupe now, and she's learning improvisation and stuff like that for the mental agility aspect. I think that's fascinating. I just do it as a rank amateur and stink at it, but I continue to try to do it for some reason. I think it is. I think it becomes that issue that you actually said to me when we got on here today. There's so much going on in life. People don't have time, and that's kind of where you see this show fitting in, is giving people some access to stuff they might not normally, wouldn't normally have access to. I think we get so busy that we don't take time for things like that. The stuff I talk about all the time in the interviewing space is when I train, I say, if you feel like you're giving enough money, time to your employer, then don't use this for that. Use it for the stuff that's important to you, like when you go out to eat or when you go shopping, or, I know you have young kids. If you have kids, the stuff I teach in the interviewing space is very good for using on children, not to manipulate them or punish them, but because we get more information, and more information allows us to parent better. So I think some of this stuff, it has multi-purposes. So
Mm-hmm.
if a business owner took that time, really what they're doing is securing their future. So it is time out of today, but when you walk away from it, you have the confidence that I'm not going to get ripped off. Or at least I've lowered the possibility of getting ripped off, which I think provides far more than saving the money. It gives you that peace of mind, and we're all looking for that peace of mind. So yeah, I think it's a good idea. I don't know how you get people to do it though.
content content is very good. You talk about technology. Remember, we talked about it off the call, and sometimes we're scared of new things with regards to technology. And technology, that's it. It is new things. That's what it is, right? And so all across time, people have been scared of technology up to a point. And so no matter when you grow up, whatever's the new thing is going to be new to you. And the younger generation might see it as normal, but just because when they're learning, that's what they're learning with. But it doesn't really make a difference. We can all learn the same thing. So with technology comes nowadays social media. Some people shy away from it, but you shouldn't. Why? Because content provides context. And so one very interesting thing that happens, and just to give a little background here, because you don't know this side of me, maybe 8 to 10 years ago, I did a lot of training on Facebook advertising and digital marketing. So I would train teams, I would give like sessions and seminars and things like that. And it was fun. But I did a lot of live streams where we would talk about what we were doing, et cetera, et cetera. But what would happen 6, 8, 10 years ago was that everything was social based. So it was based on what's called a social graph. So you had to acquire a number of followers or fans, whatever you want to call them. And then when you did a live stream, when you put out content, a percentage of them would see it. And that percentage declined and declined and declined and declined. And especially when ads came along. And so it became problematic because if someone wanted to get content out there, they needed to grow an audience, and that's hard. Or at least it was. Now, platforms like TikTok, love it or hate it, did something very interesting. They created an interest graph. So when you're on TikTok, it shows you things that it thinks you will like. It doesn't matter if you follow that person or not. And so I can put out something and have 5 followers, and it could be seen by 100,000 people or nobody. But that's the thing. So it's all based on how good your content is, not in the terms of how well produced it is, but how much people resonate with it. So if you start creating content about things like this, then people can start to see it and they're like, oh, this is interesting. And so they start seeing more of that. And then they start searching for that. And that's how we get people that would otherwise might not look into something like this to see, like, oh, okay, this is something that's interesting. And you mentioned the example of children, right? I don't know if it was Instagram or TikTok, one day suddenly a post came up and it was this lady that provides like little videos about, I guess, behavioral support for children, and just like in the family, like how do you work with this situation if they are complaining, if they are not wanting to follow the, etc. And there is very gentle videos that she's doing. And so I wasn't searching for that, and I didn't even think to search for that. But once you see it, you think to yourself, wow, okay, maybe I should follow this person and see what other tips I can get, because obviously you want to give your children the best experience possible, right? So just a little side right there, but yeah, content is a way, a very interesting way for people to learn about things that they might have not thought of.
Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah, it useful, and then also for those in the business space listening, content is very important for your business too, because when people look for you, regardless of if they found you through content, and I know you blog, so you do content, you're already doing it well, but a lot of people don't. They don't do any.
But I don't
Well,
think I do it well. I'd be
well,
really interested in your input on that because I'm so old school, and I go with this. I love the technology thing. I sure get where you're coming from. I fight that issue all the time because sometimes people want to rely on technology in the investigation space, and
mm-hmm,
really, when comes to shove, the only way I'm going to know what happened and why it happened is talking to somebody,
mm-hmm.
because they're going to have to tell me. I'm not going to know the reason behind it unless I get them to tell me. I might know what happened, but I'm not going to know those details. So I fight that technology side all the time on that. Well, we got the analytics. We really don't need the person to tell us. Yeah, I do need the person to tell me. So I fight this all the time, but I'm old school in the content side because I do a lot of blogging. I mean, I got hundreds of blogs out there, but people don't want to sit and read anymore. So, isn't the video way really the way to go? I mean, you're the expert in that. Am I trying to force feed something that people don't want anymore?
I no, you're not. You're definitely not. The important thing is the content itself, as you very clearly stated in the analogy, right? So without thinking of it, you need to talk to the person. Whether there's analytics or technology or whatever, you still need to talk to the person. Okay. So let's bring it into the context of content. You want to publish content. Sure, it could be in video, it could be in audio, it could be in text, but at the end of the day, what really matters is the content of the content, right? So
Yeah.
that's why I said and prefaced it with, you are doing it right, because the hard part is creating it. So you already do the hard part, which is drafting the article, the blog post. Now, is text the best way? Who knows? It depends on your audience. There's a huge audience on Substack of people who really just enjoy reading text. And so they
Mm.
go on Substack and they subscribe to their content creators that they like, and they just read and they love it and they pay for it. Like they have monthly subscriptions and they just subscribe to support that person who is writing these articles. So is text going away? No, definitely not. That's one way. Now, can you enhance it with audio and video? Sure. If I were you, I would just grab Riverside or whatever, and you could just actually, if you don't want to, you could do video, but even if you turn off the camera, you could just record your blog post, literally talk into the
Right.
microphone, record it, and put it out as a podcast, and people would listen to it, because I might like what you want to say, but maybe I don't have the time to read it. in my
Right.
work. But
Right.
maybe when I'm putting the girls to sleep, maybe when I'm driving the car, I might want to read it because this is content that gives itself to listening. You're not
Mhm.
showing me exhaustive data charts or interfaces. You're talking about actions and conversations, things that I can listen to and understand without looking at the screen. So,
Yeah.
yeah, to your
Hmm.
question, sure, record it as a podcast, record it as a video, you talking to the camera, do a live stream, like because you already have that content, you could just repurpose it and it could even be those same articles. Now, you could go all modern and tell AI to do the 11 labs, for example. It'll do the audio for it, and you could just publish that. But I'm still a little old school, and I mean, if you have the time, you can speak into the microphone. I feel it a little more genuine, and your readers will love it more if it comes from your voice than automatically generated.
Because really, I want them to get to know me anyhow, right?
Correct.
If I'm promoting my business, I don't want them to get to know my AI clone. I want them to get to know me. That's right.
Right, right. And there are AI clones, by the way. I don't know how much you've given in
I'm aware.
to
I
this.
haven't played in that arena, but I'm aware.
Yeah, it is. I mean, for business, again, coming to the business side, it's okay in certain terms. Wait, I can grab one of these tools, HeyGen, for example, and feed it a lot of my conversation from
Yeah.
previous videos and content. And then I can tell it, okay, now record a video of me saying blah, 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 blah. And it'll do it and it'll look like me. It won't be exactly like me. There's small nuances, but it gets pretty close, and it
Good.
uses your mannerisms and the way you go up and down and whatever. So it really trains itself on you. And so for things like maybe you want to send someone a thank you video after they purchase their training or something, that's okay because you don't have to want to record one for every person. If you want to personalize it, that sort of thing is fine. But for content, still a little on the if I can, let me record it.
Do it myself. Yep. Cool.
Tell me about influence versus persuasion.
Uh, you have been reading my stuff.
Oh, yes, I
That's
have. Yes.
uh, it is and I brought this up earlier. It's funny that you bring that up because it's that whole issue of what words mean and all the rest. Because the other one that comes into mind when you say those two is manipulation would also fall into that category. Because my wife would always say, "Yeah, you're trying to manipulate me here," and I'd say, "No, no, I'm just trying to persuade you. It's totally different." So we have to be careful about our use of terms. So influence and persuasion, interesting. When I am talking to somebody and I have to move them, you think about, and this goes back to uh, when I brought up the term interrogation. You say
Mm-hmm.
the term interrogation, and people might naturally think of, phone books and rubber hoses and things like that, which is not my definition at all. I mean, for a while, it wasn't even that term wasn't even used in the federal government because of the connotations. So I'll give you my definition, which is off of a good friend of mine, Don Rabin, who is where I learned this definition. And the reason I'm doing this is because this addresses that issue of influence and persuasion. So you don't think I'm having a senior moment here. Uh,
No.
when I go into an interview room and to talk to somebody, the person that I'm talking to sits in one of two chairs when they come into the room. If they're happy to see me and they want me to address whatever I'm addressing, they're going to sit down in what is called the willing chair. They're in that willing chair, and I can ask them questions, and they're going to cooperate with me. They're going to give me indications that they're on my side. They're going to take possession of what they're saying. They're going to use pronouns like I and my because they're owning it. And I'm going to ask them questions. They're going to provide me information. That's an interview. I'm interviewing that person. That person is sharing information. My goal is to get the greatest quantity and quality of information, and I'm doing it without opposition. Now, a person could come into the room and sit in the unwilling chair. Anybody who has children sometimes have had the child sit in the unwilling chair. People in penitentiaries that are there for the rest of their life sometimes sit in unwilling chairs. So anybody can sit in the unwilling chair, and it might not be because they did something wrong. It might be because you're looking at somebody that they like and they don't want to tell you about it. It might be they don't like you because you look like their sister's ex-husband. It might be there's all sorts of reasons people sit in the unwilling chair. So when that person sits in the unwilling chair throughout our conversation, at some point, I'm going to have to influence or persuade them to get them to understand the value of moving to the willing chair. So, and the process of moving somebody from the unwilling chair to the willing chair is what I call an interrogation, because I'm having to change their mindset as to where they sit and see the value of moving to the other chair as to how it's going to benefit them, how it benefits them, not how it benefits me.
Mm-hmm.
So when I want to move them, I want to do that mainly through influence. I want to develop a relationship with them enough where they trust me enough, where they're going to move to that other chair and not feel judged by me. Because number one, my job is never that of a judge. My job is just to get the truth. So I don't need to be judging. That's somebody else's job, whether it's their boss, whether it's a court, whether it's their, a parent, whatever it is, it's not my job. So influence versus persuasion. Persuasion sometimes is a little bit more tool oriented to get them to move versus influencing them to move from that unwilling chair to that willing chair.
The persuasion aspect of it is what a lot of people attribute to sales interviews, where
Yes.
the dealership, we've all seen that one, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe sometimes when they're calling, cold calling, there's a lot of tools, like you were saying, that people can use to now, in some cases, manipulate, in some cases, persuade. But I feel that the moment that you, as the other party, start feeling something here, like something's off, they're doing it wrong, right? They're manipulating or persuading, and our bodies are so smart. We get that, we feel that in the gut, right? And if that is
Mm-hmm.
triggered, they have to diffuse it if they know what they're doing, right? But going back to influence, which I think is much better, and you see influence with like the highest level salespeople at some businesses. I was just talking about this with John, a new customer. He was saying the other day, he was on a call, on a demo call with a system, and he says, I mean, I've been in the business for many, many years, and this guy was so good. Like, I almost bought, I didn't need it, but he was so well trained. He was one of those high end, very, very good closers that, and he was just telling me this as an experience, like, not as a bad thing, but as a wow. I mean, I got off the call and I felt, oh, I'm gonna miss out if I don't buy that. Why? Because that other person was so good at his job that he built rapport. He did everything right to get him on the side of the purchase, I guess. So going back to your point, how does one build for influence? How does one build rapport in such a, like your experience? Those are very short moments, and people are already tight, right? Maybe they're in a place of fear. And how do you build rapport in such a small period of time with a stranger, such that you can
Yeah.
do influence and not persuasion?
That, man, that is very insightful question. Uh, I think the one thing that's interesting about the investigation space and the interviewing space, where you're talking about people that, and you bring up a, a most important word in when you talk about it, is the issue of fear. Uh, we have to be very cognizant of that person's fear that's sitting across from us. And this kind of goes back to what you were saying about people that don't do the sales thing well, and you pick it up in your gut and you don't feel right about it. The one thing we have to be is sincere and real about what we're doing. And I deal with this all the time. Well, yeah, I'll do rapport because that's what I'm supposed to do. And I can show some empathy and say, yeah, I feel bad about it. If you're going to do it like that, don't do it because the person is going to pick up on it.
Mhm.
And I say this all the time because, lying is allowed in the interview room by the interviewer. But do you want to do it? Because the issue becomes to me, and think about it in your own life. Uh, if I lie to you and you determine that I'm lying to you, why are you going to tell me the truth when I'm a liar just like you are? I mean, at some point, it makes no
Mhm.
sense.
Mhm.
If you lie to me in my life, I'm probably going to distance myself from you because I can't have confidence in who you are. So why do we think in the interview room that's going to have a positive effect? So everything that we do in that interview room, number one, needs to be genuine and real. So that would be the first thing I'm saying. So I am answering your question, believe it or not. The other thing I know is that in the interview room, because of that fear, because of the subject that's happening, we have a greater ability to build that rapport and trust in a shorter period of time than like a day-to-day interaction where you're running into somebody down at the hardware store and you meet them a few times and you start building a little bit of a
Mhm.
relationship, but you kind of have your walls up. But when that fear and the dynamic exists that's in the interview room, I've seen people go to extremely deep and what we call intimate levels of rapport in a relatively short period of time
Mhm.
because of the pressures and stuff that are on the person that's in that interview room. So I think that's one way that you can do it. But the way you do that is not through you persuading them. It's through you asking them questions
Mhm.
and involving yourself in what I call demonstrating strategic empathy, which is a genuine empathetic understanding where you show them that you understand. And I've used this in several interactions that I've had with people. We have to earn the right to ask the questions, we have to earn the right to get that trust. So we have to do that work to make that happen in that room. Does that kind of address
It
that for
it
you?
does. It actually it goes in line with one of my questions. One of your posts is actually about empathy in high stakes interviews.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so interesting to read about it because it's common sense once you read about it.
That's right. You figured it out, man. I'm no Einstein, man. This stuff is common sense if you really think about it. It's just good human interaction. It's caring about your brothers and sisters. It's caring about people around you and investing in that. You're dead on right. No Einstein here.
Is it just listening? Do you think is that one of the key
Yeah.
things? Is it more about listening than anything else?
It really is. Another fantastic point. I can still hear my dad saying to me, "Hey, Mark, you got two of these and one of these for a reason. Keep this one shut and use these." We don't listen well. We listen with the intent of responding. We listen to figure out what we're going to say next instead of actually listening to the person. The older I get, the more I realize everybody doesn't think like me. The world would operate obviously much better if everybody thought like me, but for some reason everybody doesn't think that's a good idea. So I really need to listen and understand the person that I'm talking to because I really understand that I don't understand how a lot of people think. So if I want to understand how you think and what's important to you and what you believe in and the situation in which you find yourself, I need to listen, and I need to listen with my whole being, not with my ears to say,
Mhm.
okay, what am I going to say after he's done talking? I need to invest in that. And the best way to do that, if that's not something you're good at, a lot of us think we're good listeners and we suck at it. So if we want to be better listeners, listen to what the person's saying and then be working on a question to ask them to clarify more of what they're saying, because
Mhm.
people give you in the depth chart, they give you a little bit under the soil, but if you ask that follow-up question, they go a little bit deeper, and that's how you learn where somebody's really at. That's how you learn what their needs are in a business standpoint. They don't always tell you what their need is. Sometimes they don't know what it is. But by
Mhm.
you asking those questions, by you listening in order to ask questions, I think that's where the success is. So you're dead on right. We're not good listeners. We need to be better.
I love how your dad put it. I had never heard it put that way.
Like that.
That's I'm gonna quote that. That's fantastic. It's a great, especially for kids to understand it.
Yes.
That's a fantastic way to put it.
I
I,
I heard it my whole life, and it's funny because he's passed, and I when I teach, I use that example all the time, and I can actually see him and hear him saying that to me from early on, from very early on. So I think you're absolutely right. The time to teach that is now, where we teach that ability to listen, and it's just going to make our kids so different from those around them as they grow up, because they're going to have that ability to recognize where those people are at that they're encountering and interacting with.
I think that's a great point. And I think just us discussing this, empathy really comes down to how well you listen. Because you made an example earlier about people learning empathy for sales or other types of interviews, but they're just doing it to mirror the other person, and they have all these tools and they're trying to fake empathy. But real empathy is listening, because you can put yourself in their shoes or think you are, but if you haven't listened to them, really listen to them, and it doesn't have to be their words. It could also be, we'll get to cues in a second. It could also be everything else around it. Once you open yourself up to actually listen, that's when you can really have empathy. Do you think that
Yes. I,
applies?
I think you're dead on accurate, and you think about it going back to what you said earlier about salespeople and how eventually they get caught in their tomfoolery if they aren't genuine about it. I think you're always going to get caught in that. It's a matter of time. Uh, I don't know. I debate this with people I work with a lot. If some of this stuff you can actually, can you teach common sense? I'm not sure you can teach common sense. Not sure you can teach people to be genuine. I think the people that'll have success in this realm are the people that actually do have the potential. I also think there's an epidemic of narcissism in the country today. Self-centered, self-focused people who can't get
Mm-hmm.
outside themselves. I think none of this stuff is going to work effectively with those people. But if you're a genuine person that cares about people around you, I think that you can develop this sense in a way that's very beneficial, not only to, and the question becomes, are you only trying to benefit yourself?
Mm-hmm.
I don't see it that way. I think a sub category, or what comes out of this, is a benefit to me, but that should not be my primary focus, if that makes sense to you.
Yep.
So I
Yeah.
think we do need to develop this empathetic spirit, and I don't know. I totally agree with you. Rapport and empathy, if you're just trying to act it out, is not going to be effective in the long run. So I think there's a difference there. I don't know how you teach that, unless you help them to see that this really is the most beneficial thing to the world around you, but also to your work product as well.
Well, one of the ways I think can help, that at least has helped me sometimes see things that I maybe hadn't seen clearly before, is to play it out, right? And so sometimes if someone tells me something, I might or might not listen, especially if I'm a kid.
Mm.
Especially if it's something like a behavior that I shouldn't be going on with. And I a way that I don't know why this particular movie stuck with me a while back. There was this movie, I don't even remember the name, but it was about a couple, Fireproof. It's called Fireproof, and I think it's a Christian movie,
Oh,
but yeah,
yeah, it
regardless,
is.
the
Yep.
moral of the story, it was so well thought out. I think if you take out the religious context, just the way they show the interactions between the couple throughout the storyline and how he's trying to get better, but they're at a point where she no longer trusts you. Going back to your point, she no longer trusts him. Then he's trying, but now she has a wall. And so you see it, but when you see it acted out, even if it's not a like multi-million dollar production, just it well, maybe I don't know, but it's not a Hollywood type film. And but you see it acted out, and sometimes that triggers something, and you're like, wow, yeah, that is true, and because you've seen it before in other
Hmm.
people seeing their interactions, and you see how someone could have gone the wrong ways and then decided to fix it or had help fixing it, but then the other party is not ready to accept
Right.
it. And so
Yep.
there has to come a point where they both reach that sort of middle ground. And so I thought that movie was very well executed in that sense. So to your point,
Yeah.
I think if we can, going back to content, if there's a way where we can, I don't know how exactly, but if there's a way to sort of go back to the really, really core basics, storytelling. And that's how history
Mm.
showed us. Like, if you look at the Bible, if you look at the Torah, if you look at whatever, there's stories that people were telling each other through the years to show morals, to educate, right? And so sometimes I think we forget about storytelling, not just for entertainment, but to, to actually impart real knowledge
Yeah.
of life.
Yeah, when you do it that way, you also there's a story and there's the practical example of it, which makes the premise or the truth that's being taught more palatable and understandable to the receiver. So I absolutely agree, a valuable way to do it. But it's a lost art in a lot of cases.
Yeah. Yeah. I I don't know. You touched on a point that I really don't understand, but I feel it's going away, fortunately, which is the lack of actually listening in an interview in this space, like podcast space, but more traditional media. So if you have ever gone on TV, local TV or whatever, they invite the guest over and like that if you're that person going on, you're like, yeah, and this is like a break for you, and people are gonna see you on the daily news or whatever, and you're excited, but you go on, and they're not listening at anything you're saying. They have a set of questions, they just want to go
Yep.
through them. Sometimes they want to put you in a hole, right? They trick you. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just have a specific narrative that they have to like sort of guide you through, non-political, just in general. And so you come out of that like what was that? And I've seen many people have that experience, and I just don't understand it, because at the end of the day, if you're having a guest over in your show, it in my opinion, it should be all about the guest shining, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of times people have their agenda and they want to stick to their agenda, and hopefully you don't interfere with that so that they can accomplish what they want. Absolutely great example with TV journalists. I see it happen in interview rooms all the time, where there's like this preconceived notion of what's supposed to take place while you're in that room by the interviewer,
Mm-hmm.
not the interviewee, who it's really
Mm-hmm.
all about. And those don't go well. I totally agree with you. And likewise, what makes an interaction really good is you say, you have your guest on, you have me on, and this is all about me, and I come on here and I say, yeah, but this is your show. You have an audience, you have people that you're trying to support. My reason for coming on is all about supporting you. So if we both have that attitude, then the dynamic and the interaction is going to be very positive.
Very true. That's very well put. it's a two-sided
Mm.
approach, right? And if that first person has that approach, it is more likely that the second person won't be adversarial and they might want to collaborate, because at the end of the day, it is a collaboration. So I don't know why the you also touched on when people are listening, you're talking, they're not really listening, they're just thinking of what to say next. I like that you put it in the sense of you should be thinking, but more of what I should be thinking, what to ask you next, more than now, let me give you my monologue after you finish
Yeah.
talking. And I see that a lot, even in friendly groups. Friends are just talking, and if you just sit back and look at their conversation, you see how they're just trying to one up each other, and one is talking and you see the other one's just like thinking, okay, so now I'm gonna say this because now, and so it's so strange if you step back and look at it, because it's like they're not really there at all, they're just both doing their own monologue, and nobody got anything out of the conversation except maybe you had a little fun watching.
Watching it. I think there's a lot of insecurity that plays into that. I think
That is
you,
true.
and I talk about this a lot in the interviewing classes I do. You need to know who you are, and I think a lot of people really don't know who they are. And I'm not sure 40 years ago I knew who I was. So part of this comes. The illustration I've used is I've been run over several times by buses in my life, and the more tire tracks that have run over me, the more I understand that I don't necessarily understand where other people are coming from, and I need to really engage in and invest in
Mm-hmm.
understanding where people are coming from. So I think that we have to know who we are, and when we know who we are and we're comfortable with who we are, we don't have to play the competition game. We don't have to. There's nothing more irritating to me, and you described it so well. Sitting there and listen to a conversation, and you're thinking, is anybody in the same conversation here, or are we all just theatrically performing? I don't understand it. It is entertaining to watch, pretty frustrating to watch, but it is amazing how many people do that instead of just pull themselves away and say, it's not that hard to do. I mean, listening to you before we turned on the record, I don't know you at all. So I want to hear who you are so I know what I can ask you and I can understand a little bit of, more about you. That's why you and I went back and forth with, I don't know, 10 emails before we decided to do this. I just think that's so important. And I don't understand why we don't want to invest in that. It's important to realize that by meeting your needs, ultimately, my needs are going to be made. Instead of being so focused on getting my needs made that I run all over you, it just doesn't make sense to me. But people, we're not in a wait mentality in today's times, and I think sometimes we have to be in that wait mentality. And when we are, we ultimately get what we're looking for, but we've invested in others along the way. I don't know if that's
I
clear or
love
not.
that. The weight mentality, that's a good one too. It's patience and
It is
listening,
patience.
going back to listening. And also, I think I'll give you an example of why I think it's also maturity, not
Yeah.
age necessarily, maturity.
Hmm.
You've buses, right?
Drugs, buses run
So
over.
you know, based on experience, a lot of young kids don't have the experience or the maturity. Some do. Unfortunately, they get hit with maturity at a very young age, and
Yes.
and so you learn that and you get better at it. But the example I was going to give is very close family member. Father James. I think he's 87 now. He married us, baptized our girls, baptized
Mm.
my wife, married her parents, married all her siblings. Like he's done all the family, right? And very loved by the family. Very smart man. He one day asked me, because we did applications and things. He said, can you build an application that people can have on their phone that will show you the percentage of time each party is talking? So basically, who is dominating the conversation, such that you can have it and make yourself better at listening. Because if you see yourself at 90%, it means something is likely wrong. And I thought that was such an yeah, it's such an interesting insight, because probably someone younger or not as mature would not think of that, because they care about dominating the conversation instead of the other way around.
Yeah. I bet the father is not afraid of silence either. Not afraid of sitting quietly and waiting. Uh, that's something we need to learn. There's no harm in silence. There's no harm in investing just by being there, not necessarily saying anything.
So true. I have one last question for you, Mark. I don't want to
Okay.
take too much of your time.
No, this is fun. I'm having a blast. So,
That's great.
however many questions you got,
Okay.
it's cool.
Okay. So there's
You challenge me to think outside the box a little bit. I love that when I interact with people who are not in my normal circle of who I interact with, and they ask questions that cause me to think, is this well formulated in my mind? Am I right about where I'm going here? Am I conveying this in a way that'll make a difference for somebody else? That challenge you can only get by interacting with people who are outside that circle and getting to know them. So I really appreciate it. It's not a big deal.
listen, your content is very well made, because I skimmed through some of your posts, as one does, and I got so much just by reading the title and then really quickly browsing through the little headings and the content.
Mm.
It was so well laid out that I then went back and read it. And you don't see that often with content, especially people who are doing content for the sake of doing content. You sort of
Yeah.
lose some of that the quality. And so it was very easy to, from a very quick glance, get some, like, notice that there's you know how people say this is a technology thing, but they say TLDR on posts. It's like, oh, it's too long. Just like, this is the meat of it. If you don't want to read it, like, you don't, it's too long.
Yeah.
Don't didn't read. This is the thing, and it's a thing of our culture. But the way you have it set up, you can just glimpse it very fast, and wow, I need to read this without having a TLDR, right? Because it is well laid out. And one of those things was, you were talking about the myths of non-verbal cues.
Oh,
Now, I never thought of them as myths. So that caught me, right? Because all the sales books and things of the sort talk about the nonverbal cues, and you have to look at them. You have to do the mirrors and the mirror neurons, and if they're looking that way, and it always struck me as, I don't know. I mean, if we all know that if you look up and to the right, you're lying, then wouldn't someone that's good at lying just know to look the other way? Right? So, I mean, at a moment in time, they're going to catch on, and they're pretty much the cleverest ones, the ones that are doing some of the shady stuff. And so when I saw in your post that it's a myths of nonverbal cues, that really got me interested. Can you talk about why myths, and what some of these are?
yeah. Yeah, another you're challenging me here. You're taking me places. I'm going through my own transition here. I've been in the business a long time, and I learned a lot of wrong stuff. I learned a lot of myths and legacy practices that just aren't true. And the reason the stuff was done the way it was done, and it's one of my most unfavorite lines from government work, is, well, that's the way we've always done it. Well, sometimes that is not the best way to continue to do it.
Mhm.
There are things that I've seen people do to one another that I don't want to do it that way just because that's the way it was done, because it isn't right. And so
Mhm.
I'm going through a huge transition in that regard. I've actually rewritten probably 90% of my curriculum. and moved away from things that I had learned for 40 years because they are not good and they are not right. And
Mm.
so, if you've read any of my recent blogs, just did one this week on we need to change the way we do training. I've become very uh, mouthy in that regard because I've adopted what's called a science based interviewing. I want to see the research that supports whatever's being done. And when it comes to that arena of research, with regard to body language, what in the world is body language? I mean, number one, language is generally a way that we can communicate with one another because the giver and the receiver understand that same dynamic. When it comes to body language, you can sit there and twitch and look to the left and move your feet, and that can mean 50 different things to me. That's not a language. That might be an art form. It's not a language. So when it comes to this issue of body language, we have spent way too much time uh, looking at that. And I think number one, it's entertaining to talk about and it's entertaining to teach. And that's why a lot of people are out there teaching it. They're also making a lot of money off of teaching it. So they keep on teaching it, even though it
Mm-hmm.
has no validity in the world that we're in. Research studies that have been done show that we're about 54% accurate at detecting deception via body language. 54% is the best number I can give you. It's really more around 50, 51, which means you might just well flip a coin to
Mm-hmm.
determine whether you're right or wrong with regard to the issue of deception. But we keep looking at that. And that's not how we're going to detect deception. We're going to detect deception about what you and I have talked about for the last hour, which is verbally communicating with that person. We're much better at detecting deception via what they say
Mm-hmm.
than what they do. So I'm not going to stop looking at you when I'm interviewing you, but I'm going to listen to what you're saying. And I'm going to ask questions in a way that make you create your answers, which allows me to detect that deception. So when I'm talking about the body language stuff, I'm talking about the stuff that you just made fun of, which is
Mm-hmm.
the direction of eye movement, which
Mm-hmm.
is the movement of the hands, which is whether you're twitching or not, or scratching your head. I mean, that stuff can mean so many different things. I'm going to pay attention to it because it does indicate stress levels at
Mm-hmm. Well, of
times.
course.
So I want to see what you look like, but I'm not going to. I'm never going to look at you and say, "Oh, he moved this way. He must be lying," because that is a lie to do that. So does that kind of cover that for you, or
Definitely.
follow up questions because it wasn't clear?
It was clear, and it is. I think culture comes into it too, right?
Uh huh.
Correct me if I'm
Huge
wrong, but
cultural.
mhm,
Yep.
some people and cultures that are different have different body cues. They
Yep.
use their body differently, so you cannot assume, especially nowadays, that we're all just mixed together. And there's also the part of it's funny how you said it because you said I am gonna look at what you say, not at what you do, and everyone's like, no, you have to. It's all about doing and not. And I know it's a completely different context, but in this
Yeah.
context, I think you're right. You need to listen because they could do something to try to fool you. They could also say something to try to fool you, but if you're really listening, and I
Hmm.
bet you teach this in your classes, you can set traps, if you will, for that manipulator on the other side of the table to fall into like a little honeypot, such that you notice that you're being played. And so, again, listening, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the way you ask, how you elicit the information, how you ask the question becomes very important. Use a really simple example here because I know you have young kids, and I did have young kids at one time. I don't know. Maybe your kids don't ever attempt to lie to you. If that's true, you need to write a book immediately because I don't mine did. So one of the questions we ask our kids all the time is, "Do you have any homework tonight?" You realize that's probably the dumbest question on the face of the earth because they've been conditioned to answer that no and not provide any information. So the question is, how do we actually get the truth of what's going on with regard to the homework, we don't ask number one yes no questions because you can't detect deception in yes no questions. So I picked my youngest son up from school a lot when he was in middle school, and man, he had a way of not telling the truth about homework. So the joke became, how do you ask about it? Well, you ask questions like, how many subjects do you have homework in tonight? From easiest to hardest, what are your assignments tonight? What teacher gave you the hardest assignment tonight? All of those questions force the child to create an answer. And that's where you detect deception, is the difference between creation and historically telling you what is the truth. You make mistakes with regard to how you deliver the question and everything else. So we stay away, number front one, from yes no questions and ask for a narrative. And that's where, just like you said, that's creating that honeypot where the mistake is made, and then you pick up on the mistake and you know they're not telling the truth.
That's a great example. And that's a great way to fit. Fortunately, my two girls are really young, 1 and 3, turning 4.
Okay.
So not quite at that stage, but you see it. I like I was saying, our bodies are
Mm.
so good at the detecting and doing when even when a child is very very young, when they start being able to deceive, not because they want to deceive, but because they think that's the better outcome. If they, I don't know, they eat the cookie, right, they'll turn a little bit or they'll try, right, so they'll do that even when they're really young because they wanted the
Absolutely.
cookie, right, or they want it. And
Yep,
so
yep, yep.
you pick, if you're listening, if you're really watching, then you can pick up on these cues again. And so, but I love the way you put the questions. I'm gonna definitely try that one out, avoiding yes or no questions like many times in business, but also setting it up, framing it in a way where if they're just giving you the historical reference of what actually which courses gave them homework, they'll just tell it. Whereas the other way, if they're gonna lie, they're gonna have to craft a
Mm.
response, and so you're gonna see
Mm.
their wheels spinning. So that's a great one. That's amazing.
That
So
becomes very that becomes very entertaining too, Armando.
yeah,
It's kind of
yeah,
like you said, sitting in the conversation where nobody's listening to anybody and they're just one up on the other person. It's fascinating to throw questions like that into the conversation and watch people fuddle around with them. And it's one way to have cheap entertainment, I guess. I don't
yeah.
know.
Well, yeah, you have to have fun somehow, right?
Yeah, that's what I say all the time, teachers. When this stops being fun, I'm done. It's got to be a good time for me, or I'm not coming and teaching.
So true, so true. Mark, I
Uh,
really appreciate you coming on the show. It has been a blast. If we could do it another time, that would be great. We could go into deeper topics as well. Really, really interesting stuff that we talked about, but then just reading through your content, I'm sure I'm going to be reading more of your content. There's so much to learn on these subjects. Could you tell our listeners where they can find you and what services they can get from you, whether they're in business or law enforcement, etc., just so that they know where they can find you and follow up.
sure. Uh, but I guess the easiest one is I have a website, andersoninvestigative.com. And there's a ton of free material on there. I've got videos on there. Most of the blogs that we've been talking about, I post both to there and to LinkedIn. If
Perfect.
you want to find me, I don't know if any of you are on LinkedIn. If you want to do LinkedIn, I'm pretty active on there. And I post the blogs on there. If you go on
Nice.
my website, you'll see how to contact me via email. My telephone number's on there. If there's any way I can help you, especially if you're a business owner or you're struggling with any of this stuff, don't hesitate to reach out. My first thought is not what do I charge you. My first thought is how do I help you. we need to be consistent in what we say. And Armando and I have talked about this a bit. If you do right by other people, you will be rewarded in the long run. And so my first concern is not to do that. My first concern on coming on here with Armando was number one, to meet him, and number two, to see what I could do to help him and his platform. I think we need to think about other people that way. So if you have a question, you have an issue, that you need addressed, reach out to me. And I got a huge operation here. It's me. So it might take a day or two to get back to you, but I will get back to you. I just like I did Armando. He blind emailed me, and I was so curious I had to get back to him. So my curiosity will make me get back to you one way or the other. So those are probably the best ways to get hold of me.
Thank you so much, Mark. And for everyone, I'm going to put links in the show notes so you can reach Mark as well, his website and LinkedIn as well. Thank you for coming on, Mark. It was really, really a blast, and I hope we can talk again soon. Thanks,
Okay.
everyone.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
Thanks.